Hi there, this is Mark McRae, and today I got another question. And let me just start by saying I really appreciate any questions or feedback I get. The majority of them I get on YouTube, some on LinkedIn, and some are emailed in, like this one, which is Mac64. What should you do with your excess cash? Should you leave it in a bank account? Yes and no. So you have what you call a cash flow ratio. So, for example, you have different ratios for your business, but let's say that you know that your expenses over the next 3 months, any of the liabilities, anything that's short-term cash that you're going to have to pay out over the next X period, and let's use 3 months, and let's say that your overheads per month are $100,000, and you also have a tax liability of $20,000, and you have suppliers liabilities where it's another $20,000. So you've got an extra 100, so you know that if the lights were to go off right now, if the business were to close, you would have $150,000 to pay. So if you added up all of your liabilities, how much would that be? Then if you took your cash flow, so let's say, for example, your liabilities are $200,000 and you have $1 million in the bank account, then your ratio would be 5, right? So you could support that 5 times. So 200,000 into 100,000 to 5 to 10 is $1 million. That's probably too much cash for more businesses. I like to have at least 6 months of free cash flow for any eventualities that happen in a business. And anything under 3 months, you don't have enough cash flow. And a lot of non-profit organizations get this wrong. So if you're a non-profit organization and you get to the end of your financial year and you have made X amount and you give that amount to that whatever organization or niche or charity that you're supporting, I think you should keep more cash. And for non-profits, probably a year's worth of cash flow, right? Because it's harder for them to generate cash flow than most businesses. But anyway, for general businesses, minimum 3 months cash flow, and I prefer 6 months. So what do you do with the extra cash? So if you think about Warren Buffett doesn't distribute any dividends because he believes that if he has $1 of profit in his business, he can reinvest it into his business and get a better return than any other alternative. He has a better use of his money when he's using it than if you put it in a bank. So I've had occasions where I've had too much cash in a particular business, and I'll buy bonds. This is before COVID. I don't like or buy bonds anymore. And one of the reasons is I had a very big bond portfolio that was doing quite well. COVID hit. I couldn't sell the bonds. No one would buy them. When I put the bonds up for sale, there was no takers. I did eventually get out of everything, but it wasn't as liquid as I first thought. So you can do alternative things with the spare cash. You could invest it. So I have had businesses where I've invested the surplus cash into index funds, into bonds. I haven't done properties with businesses. I tend to try and stay away from that inside the business. It can make it harder to exit a business. But the question is, if you've got surplus cash, what should you do with it? And the number one thing you should do with it is try to think of ways to reinvest back into the business. So for example, if you have a business and you're spending $10,000 a month in Google ads, and it's producing X, then the logical thing to do is to reinvest more and more money so you can scale the business, right? So if there's any way that you can scale the business, that's what you do. But you do have occasions, as I have been in those situations, where you can't scale or grow because you've got restraining factors, and those could be you don't have the team needs to be trained, the type of traffic you get is very specific and you've maxed it out, And you can get to a situation where you max out your traffic sources. So there can be reasons where you're accumulating cash and you have to make logical decisions of what to do with it. So you also need to ask yourself, when are you going to need that cash? If you need it very quickly, then you don't want to put it into long-term bonds or long-term cash accounts. You want to have it fairly flexible. But there's nothing wrong with investing a portion of your cash into another investment vehicle. And that's quite common, and I think that's a good alternative if you can't reinvest it into your business. But if you take an online business, for example, let's say it makes $100,000 a year, and if you reinvested that $100,000 back into the business, you could make $200,000, $300,000. It's not uncommon for an online business to spend $100,000 and make $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 from that. That's a lot harder to do with offline businesses or businesses that are asset intensive and require reinvestment back into the business and the production of cash. So to answer the question, what should you do with the surplus cash? Number one, make sure you have enough cash reserves in the business to support you for a minimum of 3 months. If the revenue stopped and not one more penny came into your company, how long could you last paying everything that you know you have to pay plus things that are coming to you? Right? So once you figure that number out, that ratio, you should have a minimum of 3 times that, and preferably 6 times that as a comfort zone, because as you go forward, you'll be also burning through cash. And if you still have surplus cash, then you have to make some decisions that make sense to you. What is your long-term goals? Are you always going to be in a position where you have surplus cash? Because then you can start thinking about investments. Right, so a very popular thing for business owners is to have the business generate surplus cash and then invest that into real estate, shares, and bonds, and that's like trying to generate a passive income or less active income anyway. If you like these types of tips, let me know. Give me some feedback. Ask some questions. I love answering questions. And if you need any help with your business, you can reach me at markmcrae.com. Thanks for listening.